Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, we're getting rid of your audio processors. Yep, they're going to go out the door. There won't be any more in the rack. What do I mean by that? You'll find out. Mary Ann Seidler is our guest. Chris Tobin is here on this episode of TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, keeping you connected with your community with support and webinars. Online at nautel.com/webinars. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we're talking about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower, and it really did come from a tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, delighted to be here. We've got a fun show today because it's kind of like dream come true day for me. I've been dreaming about this kind of technology we're going to be talking about for a long time, and we've been able to do it before, but it's really coming to fruition now. So I'm in the Nashville studio of This Week in Radio Tech. It's the Telos Alliance studio. Thanks a lot to Telos Alliance for giving me a little bit of time on Thursday to do this show and to do a little research and talk to you about some of the latest trends and technologies in broadcast engineering. So I'm in Nashville. Our weather's okay here now. It's going to get real rainy here soon as Laura makes a turn to the east here Friday and Saturday and dumps a bunch of rain on us. Chris Tobin, you're way up in New York City where Hurricane Laura is not a problem. How you doing, man? Welcome in.
I'm doing well, thank you. Well, yeah, we do have weather coming down from the north, so we're expecting hail and heavy rain this afternoon, probably in about 2 hours. So. Yes, but it has nothing to do with the hurricane. That's what we're told. That's coming on tomorrow evening and Saturday. So it's all a matter of time.
Oh, hail. That's a term that we learned in meteorology school. If we were really mad, we could say, oh, hail.
Yeah, we never get that around here.
But you said some hail might be on the way, didn't you? Or did I misunderstand?
No, that's what they say, but 50% right, 50% wrong. So
yeah.
For the last 7 forecasts, the word hail was in there, and we have seen none.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Well, that's good. Don't complain about no hail. It breaks stuff.
I'm not complaining. Trust me, I'm not complaining. I maintain several rooftops that hail would be damaging to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's not good for radomes or car windows or...
No, not
yeah.
at all.
No. Hey, Chris, you are in one of your usual haunts, it looks like.
Yes, this is an FM combiner room atop of a skyscraper here in New York City. Yeah. It's about half a dozen FM stations combined behind me.
There was
those black elements are spares for more filters to be brought in for more stations if we want.
Oh. There was a webinar today that the SBE put on. In fact, Alex Perkovich was the speaker, and we ought to have him on the show sometime. And I only got to tune in for a couple minutes of the webinar, but as a SBE Member Plus member, and go back and watch the replay, if you will. So Alex Perkovich tried to demystify FM antennas and FM combiners. So I should watch that and then ask you some questions, Chris, because there's probably not a lot of mystery for you about that equipment behind you.
No, it's RF. RF by design is mystery, so you have to just understand it and apply it accordingly. But what's behind me is a constant impedance Shively combiner, so just to be proper, because that's what the white stuff is, bars back here. I've worked on ERI combiners, which are at another building here in New York City, so yeah. But the principles are still the same. It's just they approach it slightly differently.
So we're going to go ahead and bring on our guest, Mary Ann Seidler, early, even though we got an announcement to talk about, because we were talking about weather, and Mary Ann has a weather background herself, believe it or not. So fellow weatherologist. Hi, Mary Ann. Welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. Glad you're not here to talk about weather, but let's see. You're way up there. You're way up in the north. You're about as far northeast as you can get and still be in the U.S.
I'm in Portland, Maine, where the weather is always perfect.
Is that what they say on the billboard?
Well, we're trying to get tourism here, so it's perfect. Yeah, actually it is. It's been about 73 and sunny.
Now, I don't really actually pretend to know much about this, but don't you guys get some of that cannabis tourism up there in Portland, Maine?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Old Orchard Beach and other places really rely on that. So yeah, it's been kind of sad this summer.
Oh yeah, because people couldn't travel much to do. Yeah. Wow.
They can't travel at all. So we miss our travelers. So hopefully next summer.
I got this in the mail yesterday. from my colleagues, and I'll show it off here. So
Very nice.
I have no idea if cannabis works through this or not, and I've just pulled my earbud off, so let's see if I can undo that. There we go. So, Mary Ann, Chris and I are going to spend just a second talking about the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday, and then we're going to get to the real reason that Mary Ann is here, not to talk about weather, but to talk about this technology that is, I'm so glad it's actually here. It's on the air in a lot more places than you know about, and I wish we could tell you about them all. So anyway, hey, Chris, this Transmission Talk Tuesday thing has been going on with Nautel now for about 3 months, and the next one is coming up Tuesday, September 1st. Now, I bring this up today because we do this show on Thursdays, but the Transmission Talk Tuesdays from Nautel are on the following Tuesday. So, we can't remind you like right beforehand. We're reminding you today on Thursday. So go to the Nautel website and register for it. Here's what it's about. It's you'd think they'd have this done, but this is a lot of work. Jeff Welton, and we all know Jeff and love Jeff. If you don't know Jeff, you're missing out. Jeff Welton is talking to Matt Herndon, product manager for the project to remove Flash from Nautel's advanced user interface. Now, you'd think, well, I should have done that a long time ago. They're going to tell you, how difficult it was. And although a lot of people don't want to hear about the birthing pains, they just want to see the baby, as so to speak. And so Nautel's new software for their advanced user interface, the AUI, is Flash free. And that has been quite a project because, Chris, years ago, Flash was the technology to make these graphical things happen, and it worked really well. It was just full of holes like Swiss cheese for malware, wasn't it?
Well, it was that, plus it was a power consumption hog when it came to processing power, so battery-operated portable devices started to suffer. So that was part of it as well. I mean, there's many things. It's not just one item, but, it was, at the time, it was state-of-the-art. It still serves a purpose on some platforms in some areas, but yes, it's time to move on. And I will say this with the Nautel approach, and yes, Flash is something that is annoying for those who are trying to use their web browser to connect to their transmitters. I'm sure there's a few people still have to do a little workarounds. But 2 NUGs ago, NUG, there was a discussion at one of the NUGs about the Flash and how integral it is to the transmitter. So it's not like as if you could just do a firmware upgrade, just replace this and put HTML5 and you're done. But if you really look into what's going on in your transmitter, an Nautel transmitter, and the microprocessor side of things, you'll realize, changing the Flash is not that easy. And a few of the folks at Nautel were very honest off record about what they're experiencing and they've discovered, and they thought they had most of it worked out, and now I think they do now. They definitely do now. But it was interesting, the stories. I will say that. That's all I can say.
We went through the same thing.
I appreciated their pain.
We went through the same thing at Telos, and of course, I asked the same turns out to be stupid, question, or uninformed question that a lot of folks have asked in Nautel. Well, can't you just port that to HTML5? No, you actually can't. And talking to the developers at Telos about getting rid of Flash in certain products and getting to HTML5, they all told me it would have been a whole lot easier just to start with HTML5 instead of working HTML5 into the structure that they built for Flash, which is kind of what you were saying. It's integral. It's a part of the non-Flash code that's in there. Well, yeah, so,
if you're a code writer, or anybody who does code knows that when you're building the blocks, they're built in specific to what you're doing. So it's not like as if you say, I'm building like I'm at Unix, right? I've got Unix modules. I'm doing this and that. Let's take this Microsoft approach, this DLL, and throw it in here because it does the same thing. It's just a few lines of code different. Not even close. Flash, HTML5, same thing. Transmitter either on, off, overpower, underpower, no modulation, too much modulation. That's the kind of thing that can happen if you just decide to port over from Flash to HTML5. Those are the side effects you may not want to have,
So I think, and we're almost done chatting about it, be sure you go to nautel.com/webinars to register. And I would say that there's probably a whole lot of engineers. You may be, unless you're, well, I doubt that Chris would get himself into this situation like I have, but I'm still on version 1 firmware on my Nautel transmitters. I haven't upgraded any of them since we bought it. I know, shame on me, but you know what? They come on when they're supposed to. They read the power, they cut back if there's ice on the antenna, and they shut off when you tell them to shut off. And so why would I upgrade the firmware? And the AUIs have worked fine. I don't use them much, but now that it requires Flash to use it, I need to upgrade. And so maybe you're like me and you want to know all about the process of upgrading from version 1 firmware in your old Nautel transmitter to something more modern, go to this webinar. Nautel.com/webinars. Thanks a lot, Jeff Welton, for doing those. Thanks to Nautel for letting us talk about this coming up. Okay, now, our guest is Mary Ann Seidler. And Chris, Mary Ann has worked in the area of audio processing, as she says. Mary Ann, I'm sorry, I'm going to try real hard, but, processing is just what I tend to say.
There's no A in it, buddy.
There's no A in processing. That's right. Audio processing. And first of all, I guess, we're going to end up talking a fair amount about some products from my employer, the Telos Alliance, and you're a consultant with our company. You've been associated with Frank Foti and the Telos Alliance and Omnia for quite a long time now, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I was with the company when Frank. In fact, the Omnia was the reason I joined. I was so excited when he showed me just his initial plans, and that was the first product we dragged all over the world.
Oh yeah,
all over the world.
Was that like the Omnia FM or Omnia Hot?
Yeah, it was the Omnia FM.
Okay. Yeah. That's about the time I joined the company. Yeah. Wow. So our dream, and there's all kinds of talent that goes into this. I mean, the Telos Alliance, the name Alliance kind of spells this out. For some time, I have wanted to be able to run more and more things that we use in broadcast in if not a virtualized environment, at least not in the box that it came in. Because the more and more, the box that something comes in, if you go buy a box that is a broadcast product, even a transmitter, I should back up a bit, Mary Ann and Chris. Back in the late 1970s, before the PC came along, but computers themselves were coming along. You could go buy various small computers, and of course there were mainframes like the PDP 1170. I think the university had, where my dad taught. I was talking to a broadcast engineer in the late 70s. I was still in high school. And he said, and he didn't know this, but he said, someday we're not going to have TV cameras like these RCA TK44s. He said, we're going to have computers that make TV pictures. And he said, someday we're not going to have like audio mixing consoles like that RCA console over there. We're going to have computers that mix audio. And I'm thinking like, that sounds pretty cool, but how would you possibly know this or even think about it? And I'm sure the guys passed on since then. This was a long time ago. I guess it's been 40 years ago, and he was of retirement age then. But it's always been my dream to get more and more things. Well, if you buy an audio processor these days, it's got a computer inside it. Mary Ann, maybe you could talk for a minute about the architecture, the hardware architecture inside today's modern audio processors.
Yeah, I mean, they're based on computers. And there was a time that people, not so long ago, when people would look at that and say, oh, but it's a PC, no, this is industrial grade. This is not the PC you're going to your local computer store to buy. So, but I've noticed probably within the past 5 years, there's been a real sea change that it just accepted. And, I always used to point out to people, hey, yeah, this is a device that runs on a computer, but so is your refrigerator at home, whether you want to admit it or not. So and those really have to stay on all the time. So it's ubiquitous. And I've noticed that probably in the last 2 years, we don't get that question anymore. Because, the thing about an old-fashioned motherboard where you had DSPs and you were designing things is the amount of time that it took for innovation. Frank may have had a dream of something, but then by the time they spun up a new motherboard and put the new DSPs on it, it would be months. And now just imagine the innovations you could do so quickly when everything is based on computers.
You're right. Innovation can happen a whole lot more quickly because designing with hardware had its own challenges. And I got to give a tip of the hat to the engineers out there, and I'm part of my heart is in there too, that we have a great deal of nostalgia for purpose-built equipment. We see an old cart machine, and we usually not always, but usually think fondly of it. I want to ask Chris. Chris, we've spent some shows talking about purpose-built gear versus virtualized gear, like automation systems. Are a virtualized set of cart machines and record players or reel-to-reels. Chris, what's a piece of purpose-built gear that you kind of pine for, if any?
I miss the days of cart machines. They were fun because they were quick. You line up the cart, you slap it in, you hit the button, it goes. It goes every time.
Yeah.
As long as you keep it clean. That's the fun stuff. I mean, I'm more for the workflow and editorial. So for me, some applications virtual is ideal. Other times it's the worst thing we can do. And purpose built sometimes is the best and sometimes it's not. So that's how I approach it. But I'm thinking nowadays with ARM processors and other stuff, or how they're handling innovation, if you will, and what you can do with it. I mean, I've seen a lot of cross-member. Like here, this little guy here. This little device here has the ability to do many things that a box about the size of the combiner behind me could do maybe a tenth of it. It's pretty funny when you look at that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of stuff. I mean, the old tube transmitters were fun. Just to be able to tune up an AM transmitter, watch that tube glow, and you got the tuning right or wrong. Those are fun days. But you learn a lot too.
And it's easy to point out the faults of modern technologies and the difficulties with them. Hey, when we had to switch over to IP from ISDN, a lot of folks were pining for the convenience of ISDN. I got to tell you, ISDN had a lot of inconveniences, and inconveniences that you couldn't control because the phone company had control over that. In fact, there was back when the phone companies were. I'm sorry, we're getting far afield here. We will get back to this, but when the phone companies were talking about the demise of ISDN and everybody's having to go to IP. I got some nasty emails and phone calls or hair on fire from people who do like NFL radio backhauling and saying, how am I going to possibly do my broadcast? I can't even get good internet at these stadiums. And ISDN always works. So I called the Telos support department. And I said, do we still get calls about ISDN not working? I mean, is ISDN still troublesome at all like it was 20 years ago? And the answer I got from support was, oh, yeah, it's troublesome. I mean, sure, it works when it does, but there's plenty of times when they don't get the SPIDs right, or they've got battery voltage on it, but there's no data. I mean, there's all kinds of things ways that the phone company can screw this up. When you order an ISDN line, there's literally 14,000 options for an ISDN BRI circuit. And that's why they came up with that old Category S thing that broadcasters were supposed to order. Anyway, I didn't mean to get so far afield. My point is, we had these rose-colored glasses oftentimes for the good old days, and the good old days weren't always the good old days; they were the bad old days. And so we're always moving forward to try to get more done, less cost, better quality, more compact, and all that. And so I'm really excited for this technology because I know that the hardware to run it, the technology I'm talking about, is virtualizing different things at radio stations. And in this show, specifically about virtualizing audio processing, and getting it to run on reliable PC or server style hardware. That's what I'm all about. Because then you've got some amazing options. And Mary Ann, we're going to start talking about these amazing options that people will have, options they never had before. And they don't, a lot of folks maybe don't realize, I'm not sure I've realized all the options that become available when we can do it this way. Mary Ann, can you just, we're going to have to break for commercial soon, but can you give me just a little bit of your thoughts of an overview of the benefits of getting processing out of a box that you buy and mount in the rack, and that's what it does for the rest of its life, and getting that same audio processing into a more generic hardware platform?
So, there are many things. First of all, it's scalable. It's customizable. You can have everything centralized. If broadcasters, real estate is expensive in radio stations. And if you have racks and racks of audio processors, that takes up a tremendous amount of room. So that's one thing. But to me, the single biggest thing that I don't think gets thought about at the beginning is how it will future-proof your station. So let's say, it used to be if you had a hardware box and a new SMPTE standard came along, your box may or may not support it. And I've lived through having to put in new daughter cards and things like that to products that I've worked with. But with software, let's say a new SMPTE standard comes along, you can just implement it. You don't need to go to the boss and say, well, I'm going to need to buy a whole new product because the hardware just can't support it. And that will be so much more appreciated in the years to come as standards for interoperability start coming out more and more.
Mary Ann and Chris, here at my own office, I'm going to see if Suncast can possibly take the shot. Okay, so there you see my messy experimentation desk over there, and I'm sorry for the focus. It's just the webcam. But you do see a display on the PC there, and actually underneath that PC is a 1RU Dell server. Now, it's a refurbished Dell server. I bought that Dell server for about $600, and it is a hoss. I mean, it's got 2 Xeon processors and plenty of RAM, and I'm not going to run virtualized machines. I'm going to run 4 FM audio processors on Windows 10 Enterprise on that machine. And I'm going to have a whole backup machine too. And now you can see what's running there now. That's actually a product called Omnia SST. And that may or may not be what I run. I may run that, or I may run the new Omnia Enterprise 9S. But either way, it's going to run an FM audio processor. And what's going to come out of it is going to be micro MPX over IP. And then the transmitter site, I'll just have a hardware decoder box that Omnia also makes that, the Omnia MPX node that will decode that into analog FM composite, and is so super clean. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, the rack over to the left, that's not part of our discussion today, but that's a traditional, that's an Omnia 11 processor. And there's a BW broadcast exciter there, and also a couple of Omnia MPX nodes. But what I really wanted to point out was I'm doing this, other people are doing this, and tell you what, Mary Ann, we'll go back to you for just a sec. I kind of want to give our viewers a taste. This is no longer a science experiment. This kind of technology, PC-based, server-based FM audio processors, there's hundreds of them on the air now, aren't there?
Yes, there are, in locations all around the world. So it's fun because we've talked to broadcasters who were saying, well, I'm not sure if I want to go hardware or software, and we make both, that's fine. But when you explain the advantages of going with a high density software solution, for a lot of people, it makes a tremendous amount of sense. And the more they think about it, and the more they think, yeah, I don't have to worry about power supplies. I mean, you have to worry about power supplies in the server, but let's say you have 100 processors, you're not going to have to worry about any functioning part in 100 different machines. So maintenance cost alone. Yeah.
All right, we're going to take our first break here. Mary Ann Seidler is with us. She's an audio consultant. She does consulting work for the TELUS Alliance, and she's been a friend of Frank Foti, the company, and me, and plenty of other broadcasters for a long time. And we're talking about virtualizing audio processing. Maybe some of you saw a webinar earlier today that had to do with our friends at Nautel and Omnia, and they had, if you missed it, I can't tell you all about it right now. You could go sign up to watch the replay of that, but there's some exciting technologies there that are really only practically doable when you put everything into a virtualized environment. We'll get to that. Hey, This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by our friends over at Angry Audio, angryaudio.com. And one of the things that people have used a lot, this right here that I'm holding up, this is a Studio Hub product. Angry Audio still makes these and sells these. This will bolt to the bottom of your console, and you put your Studio Hub headphone amp in there. They're great value headphone amps. I visited a radio station yesterday here in Nashville for the first time. It's a jazz station, and Suncast, if he's got it ready, he's going to show you a picture. This, now, Studio Hub doesn't make this or sell it. Not the bezel that goes around this, not the mount. Studio Hub makes the headphone amp that's sitting in the middle of this. But look at that beautiful wooden mount. That's gorgeous. It's obviously layered wood that's then been beveled, and that was made by Roderick Graham at Graham Studios. He made the rest of the furniture there too. And I want to just point out that the size of that headphone amp is a standard. Chris, help me out. What do you call those light switches and this size right here? Not luminaire. It's Not Lux something.
The
I forget
Leviton?
what this.
The Leviton?
Yeah, well, a lot of it's made by Leviton. Yeah,
Switch?
exactly.
Yeah, it's a paddle switch. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's some name for that size cutout. I'm sure if we had a chat room, I'm sure people would tell me about it. But that's not all that Studio Hub has or Angry Audio has. You can also get this headphone amp called the Guest Gizmo right here. This lets your guest turn their mic on and off, or even cough mute themselves and adjust their headphone volume. There's even another headphone amp. You think that's all they make, but it's not. Another Angry Audio headphone amp based on the Studio Hub wiring standard in the back right here. So you can just use Cat 5 cable to hook these up and inject power with one of them if you like. It'll inject it for the rest of them down the line. And it's got both kinds of headphone jacks. As I say, it's got country and Western, the 1/4 inch and the 1/8 inch headphone jacks. So that's another thing that they make. And of course, you know about the Bluetooth audio gadget. I'm not going to talk about that, but I want to give a shout out to two people here. First of all, thanks a lot to Sharon Kay, who gave me a great tour of WFSK, the jazz station at Fisk University here in Nashville. She's the one that envisioned and had made that beautiful wooden bezel you saw earlier. And then also a shout out to my friend Gerald White, who's building new studios in Holly Springs, Mississippi at Rust College. And Gerald, this is what you need right here. You need a bunch of these. This is already built with the RJ connector on it to XLR connectors. Or, Gerald, you need a bunch of these. This is, for example, a male XLR to a female RJ45. And then you just take your Cat 5 cable and go from here all the way over to wherever your X node is, or whatever the audio input-output device you're using that's using that famous Studio Hub standard. And it's very flexible, makes your wiring go really fast. I love it. Thanks a lot, Angry Audio. Oh, don't forget, you get 20% off everything Studio Hub. Everything Studio Hub is 20% off. Don't get caught buying some cheap knockoff of Studio Hub when you get the real Studio Hub at 20% off. Call your dealer and say, I want my 20% off. I don't want to be embarrassed by putting some cheap stuff in. Give me the real stuff at 20% off. And there you go. Thanks a lot, Angry Audio, for sponsoring this week in Radio Tech. All right. Let's say I got a question from Suncast, but Suncast, I'm not sure I know what you mean, so you might have to explain that a bit. We're talking to Mary Ann Seidler, and Mary Ann, so let's move forward a bit. There's been PC-based audio processing for a while now. Leif Claeson's had his breakaway. Hans von Zutphen has had his stereo tool for quite some time, and then there's Omnia SST. But there's a new really high performance product that's out, and we're not here to sell the product. We're here to talk about the technology. It's this Omnia Enterprise 9S from largely from Leif Claeson. What can you tell us about what it does and why? What it does and why are some really big broadcasters all of a sudden snapping this up and making their infrastructure built on this?
So what it does, let's think about the Omnia 9. So it has basically the same feature set as an Omnia 9. So it can have FM and streaming and HD or DAB. So, but on that, it's also designed to be scalable. So it's designed to be in a very high density environment. But then into it, we've also been able to, and this is where it breaks away from the Omnia 9 hardware, because it has SMPTE 2110 implemented. It also has SMPTE standards for redundancy implemented. So those are things we were able to do quickly. And it's SMPTE 21-7 for 20-22-7 for redundant string support. So it's things like
at least it's not alphabet soup, it's number soup.
Jeez. So it's things like that we have been able to implement that makes it perfect for this type of environment. And there'll be more of them in the future.
We're not at liberty to name the broadcasting companies that have implemented a lot of this virtualized, but they, on the one hand, are rather large companies with hundreds of transmitters. And so on the one hand, they've got big IT staffs. If you ask the IT staff, hey, we need whatever servers you've got to get. We want to implement 200 of these audio processors. Here's their approximate CPU load. Here's the networking load that's going to be taking, either LiveWire or AES67 in. It's going to spit out, whatever it may be spitting out. And there's going to be quite a bit of network activity. Big broadcasters have this kind of brain power on staff or easily available, and that's the kind of people who've been picking this up first, right?
Well, yes, but interestingly enough, so what we think of is these big broadcasters, maybe in other areas, they've got large IT departments, but you know what? It's the same broadcast engineers that have done everything else that are learning this. Now, we are seeing a new generation come in many places, or people just starting to learn about this. So, and once you understand it, it's not that much different than anything else we've ever learned. So but that is saying, look, you don't need to have a big IT department to do this. And one thing that I've been hugely appreciative of is now with the work I've done with Telos, we have people who are specialist in helping everyone walk through setting up their network and walk through whatever configuration they need. One thing also about this software is you're able to design it just the way someone wants. So we have one customer who wants left, right, out because they're going to satellite receivers. They're going to a satellite network that'll then go to satellite receivers. Other people want to use the micro MPX out, and others want to use composite out. So any of those can be available. Also, what's cool is, let's say today you have many FM stations, but 5 years from now, those may be streaming. So all we have to do is change the license around for you. So I love that. And, one thing I never thought of when we were talking about this 2 years ago is we were talking about different ways it could fail over. And a couple of our customers were saying, look, we want it to fail over to different cities. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever think, well, a pandemic may cause this to be really important. But go figure, it's 2020, so of course there's a pandemic. There were shark attacks in Maine the other day, so what next?
Early in our broadcast, you mentioned flexibility, and that word is thrown around by salespeople all the time. Oh, it's very flexible. What does that really mean to me? What does that mean to me? And I want to give an example. Chris may have heard this example already, and actually, Mary Ann, I think I mentioned it to you yesterday. But you guys may recall that back in January of this year, before the pandemic really hit, we suffered a tornado at our radio station in Cleveland, Mississippi. And it took out the top 40% of our STL tower. And so we lost our STL. Now, and we also lost internet there for a week. And by the way, it was Josh Bone's Max Connect that got us internet back at our studio for a few days. The long and the short of my story is this. After I got everything working as best I could there, I left and came back home. When I came back home, internet went off again from our commercial provider in Cleveland, Mississippi. Now, it was kind of interesting because actually Cleveland, Mississippi has been a hopping point for one of our FM stations. We actually create the content in Greenville, Mississippi, and we shoot it to a transmitter in Arkansas, but we shoot the same programming to a transmitter in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. I know these are small places. And but Cleveland was the hopping point where we would hop it to there, insert the EAS information, and then STL it onto Mound Bayou. Well, we lost internet at Cleveland while I was gone. Nothing I could do because I wasn't there anymore. But I put my thinking cap on and I thought, you know what? In Greenville, Mississippi, where we produce the station, I can create a stream, a high quality stream, not just our usual consumer internet stream, but I can create like a 256 kilobit per second stream of our station. Pretty good quality AAC. I could receive that stream up here in Nashville at my home where I've got fiber internet. It's really good. And then I can feed that left-right audio. It's not processed. Have that left-right audio into an FM processor I have here at my house. I had Omnia SST running on a little computer, a little fanless computer. It runs fine on that. And so I ran that left-right audio by live wire from this very Zip 1 right here over into that Omnia SST. I processed it, put in RDS, stereo generator, also everything in there into the micro MPX format. And I left this out earlier. I had a micro MPX decoder sitting in Mound Bayou, Mississippi, feeding that transmitter already. But again, my hop point in Cleveland was dead. So we would, for a couple of weeks, until we were sure the internet was back on in Cleveland, Mississippi, we shot this audio, coded audio to Nashville, a 7-hour drive away. And then I processed it here, put it in stereo format, added RDS to it with our call letters and everything, and then shot that back as micro MPX to Mound Bayou, Mississippi. Cleanest audio I think it's ever. It was just beautiful and very reliable too. So my whole point there is that's flexibility. I didn't have, well, I guess I did. I had an Omnia 11 sitting here, but I had no way to get the Omnia 11 back to Mound Bayou, Mississippi. So with the flexibility that IP offers and being able to do audio processing on different platforms and formats and places, and whether it's in the cloud or your own cloud or a PC sitting across the desk from me, oh my goodness, that's flexibility. Mary Ann, is that what we're talking about when we say flexibility?
Yeah, I mean, let's take an example. Let's say we have a station in Eastport, Maine, and they want to make sure that they absolutely always stay on the air. So they could have multiple servers where they have the processors, but then they have a failover from one server to the other. But then, just for backup, in case something happens to Eastport, it could fail over to Lubec, Maine, which is across the bay. So if Eastport is just shut down, no one can get into Eastport, a great city, by the way, then the station can keep broadcasting. And they wouldn't have to go through, your stations are lucky they have you. Someone wouldn't have to go through that many machinations to be able to just have it keep working. Or let's say, here's another thing, is what about stations who want to have specialty programming? So let's say, I know a lot of stations like to have Christmas programming. So maybe they want to spin up 2 or 3 stations for that. So you can do that. And, you don't just go out and buy a processor for Christmas programming and then, remove it. Then no one will let you do that. But if you have a subscription with this, then you're able to turn that on and turn it off when you want.
Ah, that kind of flexibility. Okay, so you need to spin up, or you're going to add an HD2 or HD3 to your station. Right. You don't have to buy an HD processor. You can in effect rent or lease or license for a time. Okay.
Yeah. Or let's say
go ahead.
Nope. Well, let's say you've got HD2 and 3, and you want to lease it out to someone else, and you can turn it on and off for them as well.
Okay. It's worth pointing out. You know how if you are a radio station that streams, you may have, if you're going with a company like Triton or Stream Guys, you can have more than one mount point that you send your stream to. You can have a main one and you can have a backup one, which will probably be in a different data center somewhere. So if one data center goes offline, you've got that other place to go. You have the same kind of redundancy available when you do processing either at your studio or in a data center or at your house in Nashville, Tennessee. You can choose where you're going to do it from on a backup, emergency, or even a regular basis. And then with, and folks may not know this, so I'll just mention it, the Omnia MPX node that I have at the transmitter site in Mound Bayou, it can receive feeds from different places. And you can tell it, hey, ignore that feed and switch over to this feed. Or you can just turn off the feed you wanted to ignore and send it a feed on a different port number. You can send it through a different IP address. I mean, if you have more than one carrier at your transmitter site, I hope you can. And at our site, we will soon. We'll have 2 carriers there. So this kind of flexibility isn't available with a piece of hardware sitting in your rack connected to a hardware STL transmitter, connected to a hardware antenna. That you don't have that kind of flexibility. Now you may argue, well, maybe I've got more reliability. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Stock trading is done with server-based platforms now. So, and has been for years. And, if billions of dollars are depending on that every day, for fast operation then I think broadcasters get to glom off the reliability found in other disciplines and other areas of IT, and we get to put that to use. And that is actually a huge, huge advantage. I got another thing I'd like to talk about with regard to the hardware itself, because not everybody's going to be able to do this on a big IT infrastructure basis. Maybe you're a small to medium broadcaster like mine. So we'll talk about some advantages there in just a minute. This week in Radio Tech, it's number 507. Our guest is Mary Ann Seidler. I'm Kirk Harnack. Chris Tobin is up in a transmitter site. And Chris, I want you to chime in with me for a minute here. We're going to talk about the Broadcast Tools ProMix 4. It's a mono mixer. And Chris, simplicity sometimes is really important. Can you see where a mono mixer might be helpful if you're going to ship it to a morning guy at home and tell him to plug it in and use it?
Absolutely. Morning guy, or even if you have a talk show host that has to be off site, or maybe you have a monthly public affairs show with a governor or a mayor or a senator, and you need to have them on a regular basis. You set them up in their den, whatever, and you're off to the races. The nice thing about the ProMix 4 is it's simple to use. You can talk them through it over the phone.
Chris, you and I, years ago, were tried to do the TWiRT show together in the same studio over at CBS Radio. And we discovered very quickly the folly of our effort, because we were both in the same room. We were 15 feet apart from each other, but we forgot about the delay. There was an enormous delay, as there is. You and I have a delay right now, but we don't know it because we're not in the same room together, right? Mary Ann's up in Portland, Maine. You're in New York City in an undisclosed location, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. And what I'm getting at is this: if you have talent that are doing shows all by their lonesomes at their homes, you may not need an audio mixer. You can just go right in with a mic to USB adapter into your laptop or computer and go hit the studio with that audio. Fine. But if you've got a couple of people doing a show together in the same location, and you're connected via IP to some place where you're a contributor to that audio feed, guess what? You two cannot be on two different laptops, each feeding audio separately to that remote place. There's way too much delay. It'll drive you crazy. What you need is a little audio mixer, a simple audio mixer with a live zero delay audio monitoring. So let's say let's imagine for a minute, your morning guy and your morning gal are married, okay? And they are doing the show from home. All right. She could be the lead and he's the giggle guy. I don't care how it works out, but you got two of them in the same room. And you want to do that show, you need to have a mixer, and you need to have zero delay audio to hear the other person. Now, your audio coming back from the automation system at the studio, in the data center, wherever it is these days, that can be delayed slightly, but you don't want to hear the other person delayed coming back. And my employer, Telos Alliance, has got solutions for up in the IT center, but at the studio, at the home, at the kitchen table where you are, you need that zero delay. And that's where, I'm getting around to it, that's where the Broadcast Tools ProMix 4 is absolutely ideal. It has a USB connection to your laptop, so you get that audio out. You get the IFB, the return audio, coming back from the cloud infrastructure studio, wherever it is, so you can coordinate with your songs and do your talkovers and all that. But your partner you're talking to in the same room, hey, you've got zero delay right there. And that's what I'm getting at. We've never talked about that being a benefit to the ProMix 4, but that's one of the situations that it works in just great. The ProMix 4 is a professional little audio console. It's got on-off buttons. It's simple pots there that you set and forget if you like. It's got a tally output, simple LED view meter, a VU meter on it, and headphone controls for each participant. It is the ideal solution for so many things, including that USB in, that green button up there. Simple to plug in the back as well. You could even put little color coding buttons on the back of it if you needed to, engineers, so that your morning crew can take care of that. That's one of the possibilities for the ProMix 4. That, taking it out to remotes, which you're probably not doing now, or hey, put it in a little production or voiceover room that you may have. It's an inexpensive way to get the job done. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Tools, and thanks also to Broadcasters General Store. That's where you want to order your ProMix 4 from. bgs.cc is the website. And the phone number, I have it memorized. I have for years. 352-622-7700. Thanks a lot to Broadcasters General Store for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And another way to use it. Trust me on this. I've got it all figured out. Mary Ann Seidler is our guest on today's show. So, Mary Ann, I was at the IBC show in Amsterdam about 3 years ago. And one of the engineers there, in fact, I think it may have been Sasha Ludwig. I think you probably know Sasha. And I was asking Sasha about, so what's the benefit of using a server platform as opposed to a desktop platform? Because I was kind of starting to learn about buying refurbished, because that's what I can afford, server platforms, Dell or HP. My friend Alex Hartman taught me that. And he said, yeah, buy a server platform. You can run it hard. You can run that CPU. It's got, each one of those things has got a dozen or 18 fans in them. If a fan dies, so what? It'll let you know on the front panel. 2 power supplies is, standard. They're really well built. Whereas if you're using a desktop platform, which you can certainly use, but, if the fan dies, you're off the air. If the hard drive dies, you're off the air. If the power supply dies, you're off the air. Whereas I got a server platform, I've built a bunch of these now and put our stuff in them, and RAID hard drive arrays, dual power supplies, and lots of fans. So I guess what I'm getting at, Mary Ann, is that hardware can matter, and you can't get all those advantages with a purpose-built box. You can get some of them maybe, but not all of them. Talk to me, Mary Ann, about what you're hearing from engineers about putting 24/7 software that's got to run all the time into a very professional hardware environment.
So everyone so far has used servers, thank goodness. And you're right, they're picking them for those reasons, and they're industrial. But what the advantage also is, and they're not expensive. And if you're only going to run a few copies of this, then you don't need a very expensive server. And you should just ask us, because we can at least give you the specs for what you would need. It depends on exactly what you're running for Omnia 9S. But one of the advantages is, let's say you could have 8 instances on one server, and you could have many more depending on the size of the server, but then it could fail over to multiple machines. So if you were trying to do that with individual boxes, think about what a nightmare it would be. There'd be no way to really do it. So that, again, that's a very big advantage. And you can also move things around. And let's say there comes a time that you say, the server has done its job. I need to move to another server. Then you can, but your licenses, because you've gone, let's say, with a subscription model, as we come out with changes and improvements, then you can just have those improvements. So your software 5 years from now is as relevant and as up to date as it was the day you buy it. And that never, ever happens with hardware. The time is ticking from the second you pick that box up.
There's a concept that dovetails with that, and talking with another big broadcaster, we came up with this, and that is if you go buy a hardware whatever, we're talking about audio processors, so we'll use that. If you buy a hardware audio processor, it's going to have a lifespan. Who knows? It may be 7, 8, 9, 10 years, something like that. And if it dies, and even if it dies prematurely, it's dead. You have to buy another one. Now, maybe you've written it off. Maybe it's been depreciated and taxes and all that stuff, but you still have to go buy another one at the retail price or whatever discount you can get. Whereas if you buy, or if you have a subscription model for software and your hardware dies, you still have the software. You can still go install that software on some new hardware. So if a piece of hardware dies, if a fire happens in the back end of your server and it's really no good anymore, and now you got 4 stations that you were running on that server, and you've moved them over to an N+1 situation, but you got to replace the server. Guess what? You don't have to buy the software over again, or if you're subscribing to it, you're doing that now. And what a huge benefit that is. You don't just have to go flush $10,000 on replacing that piece of hardware. Not that it's a flush, but you know what I mean. So is that another thing that broadcasters are talking to you about? That kind of safety?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because this gives, it's a dream come true, because you can have so many different types of redundancy now that you couldn't have before. One thing that's always kind of driven me crazy is when people will say, well, okay, I'm using this hardware processor as my main processor, and then I'm going to take my processor I had on the air, and now I'm going to use that as my backup. Isn't that kind of risky? Because now you're putting your older processor as your backup, and you're gambling that it's absolutely going to work when it's getting older by the day. So this, one thing you can even do with software like this is, like the Omnia 9S, is you can then have it as your backup. So let's say you love whatever processor you have on the air now. It's a hardware processor, and that's great. But now you can use this or a version of this as your backup processor. So you're never going to go off the air. And then you start building when I was thinking about this today, AOIP and everything that Steve Church did, that's the basis for why we're at the point we're at now, that it makes sense to have products like the Omnia 9S.
We were actually, you and I were thinking the same thing. I was going to bring that up if you didn't, so thank you for bringing that up. And Chris Tobin, chime in here too. Without audio over IP, linear, super high quality, low latency AOIP, all this stuff, virtualizing all this stuff wouldn't be possible or wouldn't be worthwhile. I mean, if we had to build a data center and have a sound card and have some little old plugs coming out of the sound card and go down to the next thing in the rack, you might as well have individual boxes at the radio station. There's no point in virtualizing or homogenizing this stuff if you can't have the native connectivity among servers, IP, doing all the heavy lifting. Chris, what are your thoughts about that whole paradigm, moving into that and AOIP enabling that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it gives you the ability with the workflow, the flexibility. I mean, it's a no-brainer on many levels, and if your budgets permit, you go in that direction. That's where you should be moving to become future-proof. Hardware stuff is still valuable for a moment, but as time goes on, as Mary Ann pointed out, the clock is ticking. Time to start looking at alternatives, and depending on your workflow, your business model, this is ideal. And the Omnia 9S gives you definitely a stepping point. You walk into that. If you're doing servers, you should be looking at that stuff anyway for servers. The boxes, the PC box themselves is okay, but the server class is where you should go with what you're doing, and you just build on it. Audio over IP offers the opportunity for, let's see, flexibility, redundancy, growth, a few other things. So it's easily implemented, and also it's off the shelf. It's commercial off the shelf products that are used by other industries, so it's being battle tested. It's not like as if you're trying something new. It's never been done before. So there's a lot of things. Cisco switch these days has a life. Mean time between failure of 20 years.
Oh, gee, yeah.
How many routers do you know that have that kind of capability back in the day? They did.
Like I said, if it wasn't for AOIP to tie this together, because it was the IP that was there in the first place, and because other industries have pushed IP technology to get better and better and faster, it's enabled us to finally put audio and, of course, now video over IP. It's just amazing where we're going, and I'm glad the broadcast industry gets to take technologies and techniques from other industries, because we used to take them from the phone company, right? Where did 600 ohms come from? Came from the phone company. Where did punch blocks come from that we used and pretty well liked in broadcast for a long time? It came from the phone company. Came from phone technology anyway, and now we're able to grab this stuff. But that doesn't mean that it's perfect as it is. If we wanted to do like all this COVID stuff where people are working from home, could we have even made this work even 5 years ago? I say not as well, because people's home internet wasn't as good 5 years ago. Some places it's still a challenge, but now that for the most part, to a large part, people can get much better, reliable internet service. Wow, even in most of my transmitter sites now either have or are about to get two sources of internet or IP connectivity. And they're in Mississippi and Arkansas. Holy moly. If I can get that in rural Mississippi, then there's a lot we can do. I'm amazed. Mary Ann, what do you, Chris and you both, Mary Ann, talked about everything being over IP. And it reminded me, do you remember just less than 10 years ago, if someone purchased a multi-line phone system from my employer, Telos, and you looked at the back of the box, it had a whole bunch of connectors on the back, right? It might have 12 phone jacks on the back of it. And it would have an AES audio in, AES audio out. It would have analog audio in, analog audio out. It would have a network connector to run your phone controllers with. And now, well, battle-worn, battle-proven, you go buy a current phone system from my employer, Telos. It has two power cords because it's got redundant power supplies, and it's got two network jacks on it, one for the WAN and one for the LAN. And that's it. That's it. It's easy to hook up. You do a little typing, okay, maybe a half day's worth of typing, and you're on the air with all your phones, all your phone lines, and all your studios. To me, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here, that same similarity with putting your audio processing in this environment. Mary Ann?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, it was funny. I was talking to someone the other day about a console because they're building a podcasting studio. And I said, oh, please, you've got to get a console with AES 67. And I said, honest to God, you will thank me for this because otherwise it's just such a hassle. And that's not the future if you're looking at an analog or digital console without it. So but one thing, that being said, we do have with the Omnia 9S, it comes with an ASIO card, so a sounds card. So if someone doesn't have AES 67 connectivity, they can always get into the Omnia that way. So
yeah, okay, gotcha. So Gotcha. That's the card that can go right in there. I was again, we're not allowed to speak the names of the broadcasters, but these are some of the biggest broadcasters around the planet that are now implementing or already have implemented this PC. IP CPU-based processing. They're using it for a variety of different things. You mentioned one that is coming out as left-right audio because they're doing satellite distribution, and that's what the satellite distribution system wants. I would imagine at the transmitter sites, they're taking that left-right feed from the satellite receivers, and they're doing their own stereo generation at the transmitter sites, right?
Yes, yeah, and that's what they needed something. So what they're doing eventually, I'm sure they'll move ahead with things, but this allows it to fit into what they have now. Yeah. So,
but doesn't preclude going more IP and more simplicity down the road.
Yes, and that's what's cool is as we, let's say, talk to satellite manufacturers, maybe there comes a day that they could just have something at the site that it would be all in one. Satellite.
Exactly. Yeah. Another company is using it for their DAB processing. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Also for streaming, because the requirements for DAB processing and the requirements for streaming are basically the same. Just maybe different bit rates coming out, but yeah.
Yeah, and now they're looking at saying, hey, gosh, maybe we want to do this for some of our FM networks as well. But that was the first project that they had, so that's why they did it with that. And another set of stations is using it with micro MPX out. So to go point to multi-point.
Which
it can do anything.
I know a little while ago I turned the camera around. I showed you. I know you couldn't hardly see it, but there's a 1RU Dell server over there that I got for cheap, and I got another one just like it. I'm going to have two of them running. I have some radio stations in American Samoa, and for over 3 years now, we've been shooting over an IP link. We've been shooting live wire to the transmitter site. It's just a 3-mile shot. It's like this because it's to the mountain, or the edge of the volcano. And I have decided that I don't want all those audio processors at the transmitter site. It's really pretty cramped in there now. And so my plan is, instead of running live wire to the transmitter site, and actually I'm going to keep some live wire, but I'm going to bring all the audio processors back, or they won't be there at all. We're going to run these servers running Omnia Enterprise 9S with micro MPX output. We're then also getting the Omnia MPX nodes. So that's the only thing that'll be the transmitter side. It'll be 4 of them in 2 rack units. And so that'll be 4, composite outputs going to 4 transmitters that we have up there, and to an STL to shoot to the other side of the island. And one thing it will do is it will decrease our dependence on the super, super critical IP shot that we're doing now. In other words, if anything goes wrong, if there's any interference, if there's anything goes wrong with our IP shot, LiveWire doesn't like that. LiveWire was designed for a piece of wire, a piece of Cat6. And so we all know that IP radio shots can have packet drop now and then. We can also do a backup over either public internet, or we have a friend with another IP shot to the same mountain, and we can just glom onto his for backup for the micro MPX. And all that's made possible by doing this all with IP, and I realize we're doing that now, but also doing it at a lower bit rate that can stand some little bit of packet loss here and there. So just another use for making things more reliable and just mo better overall. Chris, in New York City, can you see some broadcasters there picking up on this idea of getting rid of their purpose-built processors and putting a bunch of them into a server?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know of at least four broadcasters that would probably be doing that. Yeah, absolutely.
Mary Ann, you mentioned failover, and earlier you mentioned different servers, different cities, and I can't stress the importance of that. If you've got a lot of your broadcast operations in a server center somewhere, maybe do all your streaming there now, and then you go to add doing your FM processing and maybe even spot insertion for different regions and so forth. But to be able to have all that backed up and move somewhere else quickly has got to be a big advantage, and you don't want to do that with buying a whole bunch of hardware boxes. You want to do that in software.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Since it's 2020, I'm going to make a prediction that the next thing that will happen will be Godzilla will be attacking. So, we just have to anticipate it. So if Godzilla takes over Portland, Maine, if you've got a backup in Bar Harbor, Maine, well, then there you go. You're saved. Or at least your radio station is. You may not be.
The radio station's saved. That's right. Well, hey, I want to talk about...
I hope Godzilla doesn't go to your city.
What I saw and I reposted this meme the other day. Hopefully 2020 will be like a mullet, the haircut. Short in the front and all party in the back. Never mind. Wasn't that good of me.
Yeah.
This is no meme right here. This is the real deal. We've been talking about IP and doing things over IP and having backup. That's what this is. This is your backup. It may be your main if you need it to be. This is the Max Connect wireless IP modem, and it looks like a Cradlepoint modem, but it's more than that, because their service will work in several different brands of 4G LTE modems. This particular one has cards in it for both Verizon and AT&T, and I can switch them. If one of them's getting me bad service, I can go to the other one. And it's got a WAN pass-through and a LAN jack on there. This gets you special service with the carriers. You're not sharing bandwidth with everybody, every other Yahoo that's using that tower. You get your own bandwidth. And that's what the Max Connect wireless service is all about. As a broadcaster, you need to have every packet appear. You need for it to be reliable. You don't need for a caravan of people to come by in a Greyhound bus all with their cell phones on and knock your radio station bit rate down or off. And Chris Tobin knows this because he and his friend Sam Wu have used these things at remote broadcasts reliably to when the every other Yahoo is going in the stadium and they got their cell phones on and they're using a lot of data. There's not much left over for them, but because they're on Max Connect, they get their own data. And the other thing I want to point out is you get your own IP address. It's a static IP address. And I know you can live without having a static IP address. But in a few cases, you can't. You need to have a static IP address to shoot that audio to that you're going. That's the way some broadcast systems work, and that's what Max Connect makes available for you, to have a fixed IP address that you can rely on and data transmission that you can rely on with Max Connect Wireless. Check it out on the web, maxconnectwireless.com. I know it's spelled funny. It's always in the show notes. So if you need to go there and look it up, do so. And if you've got a transmitter site or you do remotes, this is the cat's meow, the bee's knees. It really does work well. Max Connect Wireless. Thanks, Josh, for sponsoring the show and for making available wireless to me and to Chris when we're out on the road and we need it. I know we haven't been going on the road much, but Chris still does. He goes to different places. Hey, Mary Ann, we always do a tip of the week at the end of the show, and I know I didn't warn you about it because I'm a terrible host. So I'm going to let Chris Tobin go ahead and start out with the tip of the week and give you, Mary Ann, just a moment to think of something that you'd like to leave our listeners to investigate, to know about, or to have a resource from them. Chris Tobin, what would you think your tip of the week is? And I'll put my tip of the week right here on me. Take it away.
All right, Mr. Bain. Let's see. The best thing to think of, and since we're talking computers, virtualization, IP, all that stuff, don't forget, and I'm not sure why people do this, you have servers in the rack, you have equipment in the rack that has RJ45 connections to it. Put in a service loop on the cable, please. Okay? Rack rails are a great feature. However, they really don't work well when the cable in the back of the server is taut. Service loop. Yeah. You want to pull it out of the rack. You don't want to have it. You don't want the automatic disconnect feature because it's very ugly. When you pull that server out, and all of a sudden you hear snap. It's like, whoops, that's not what's supposed to happen. That retaining clip on RJ45 has a purpose. You don't defeat it with rack rails. So I'm suggesting service loops on everything you do, even RF cables. I've been at a couple of sites in the last 3 weeks that we were working on a transmitter, a small little guy, nothing special. And we were looking and like, wow, we can't move it. Why? The 7/8 line coming out of the rooftop down into the transmitter did not loop. It literally came straight down into the rack, right angle DIN connector. That was it. We couldn't move the transmitter. We had to unplug the cable, pull the transmitter out, swing it around, plug it back in. I was like, really? So tip of the week, service loops. They're valuable. They can come in very handy on many things, and especially with IT. Whatever you do with IT, service loops.
I got a quick question about service loops in the back of racks where you might pull a server out. Some servers have those arms that articulate
the accordion arms. You can,
the accordion. Thank you. If you don't have those, what's a good technique to tie your to make your service loop so it's neat enough when you've got the thing pushed in, but also long enough when you want to pull it out? Do you have a technique that works for that?
It varies on the rack layout, rack design. What I usually have done in the past, but I don't have that feature because if you have a Dell server, they come with it if you have the right package. I pull it all the way out, and I look inside, and I look for a chase way that makes sense. And then I practice, different layouts. Every rack is different. I mean, I've worked with several racks where some of them, like, whoa, that worked on the other one. Oh, different brand, different position of a rail or a support arm. I was like, darn it. So yeah, you have to practice. You just have to try it out. Pull it all the way out, and then run a cable and see where it goes. You'd be surprised. Most of them you can find an easy solution.
Gotcha. All right, Mary Ann, we got just a minute left. What kind of tip or last word would you like to leave with us?
You know what? It sounds silly, but make sure that your Cat5 or Cat6 cables actually work. A couple of weeks ago, I was with my boss, and we were trying to troubleshoot this problem that I said, I don't know, I can't get this working. And he went through everything. And it turned out in the end, it was the cable. And you know what? I would have checked it immediately on an XLR, but I didn't think to do it on the Cat5 or 6 cable that I had. Dang it.
Dang it. And so right. You're so right. Check the cable. It's almost always the cable.
But for some reason, I wouldn't have thought of that with a network cable.
Yeah.
Because they almost seem indestructible. They are not, obviously. I felt like an idiot.
Mary Ann, thanks for being with us. It's been fun. And I know that part of what we've been doing here is just dishing about the tech that we love, but we love it because there's great promise for it, and not just promise, it's being fulfilled with literally hundreds of software-based processors on the air right now, mostly in countries outside the United States, but there are hundreds of people on the air with these things right now, and I'm just looking forward to as we keep moving forward with that. We got to go.
Yeah.
Mary Ann, thanks for being with us. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much, Kirk. And you too, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Chris, good to see you.
My pleasure. Good to see you all. It's been a good time. I'm having a good time.
All right. We're going to go have a post-show beverage. I want to thank Suncast, the producer of This Week in Radio Tech, and also Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network, home of other fine podcasts. We're going to have to go, and we'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.